Hi. Very early good morning to people in South Asia, and then good evening, early good evening to the people in Utah and United States, and welcome to everyone, all the lab users and audience from all over the world. This is the continuing LabVIEW champions, LabVIEW expertise, LabVIEW personalities interviews from all over the world. We have done like several interviews, and we have learned tons and tons of the experiences these personalities as well as the LabVIEW champions had in their entire career. So today we have invited a very special guest all the way from United States, and we'll be continuing that journey with him. My name is Gurung. I'm the certified LabVIEW architect and LabVIEW champion as well, and I'll be the host for today. And today we want to take you all the way to Utah and then learn a lot from no other than Quentin Alldredge, also known as Q. I think you guys must have seen lots of presentations in the past at different conferences. And in LinkedIn, if you have seen, like he has started the initiative of Q Tips. That's very trendy as well, and you will learn a lot from this, fellow LabVIEW champion. Also, like his company is also the Center of Excellence from NI. With further ado, I want to truncate this like an introduction and let the man speak for himself. So, welcome very much, Quentin Alldredge.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be numbered among the ones that you've interviewed so far. You've got a great group of people that you've interviewed. So it's awesome to be numbered among them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Q. So, like, you can introduce yourself and then, like, tell us our audience. Maybe, like, some of them may have already been following you, but like, some people for them, uh, they may not be aware of like what you are doing, where you are from, and everything, and then how you started your LabVIEW journey and career and everything. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. Well, first I should probably start off by just saying I'm open to everybody calling me Q.
Uh-huh.
It's a nickname. Of course, my name's Quinton. Starts with the letter Q, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm a big Star Trek fan, and so my
Wow.
brothers always called me Q because
Uh-huh.
of the character from Next Generation Star Trek.
Yeah.
And then later on, as I tell my background, one of the places I ended up working, they started calling me Q for the James Bond
Wow.
reference, and so
Ah.
I'll talk about that some more. But
Yeah.
yeah, as most of you know, the posts that I've been posting, the Q tips are about my toolkit Q controls, which is a replacement for LabVIEW controls, and I'll explain how that came about too and the history behind that. Um, but do you just want me to go right into my history, or?
Yeah,
Yep.
you can like walk us through a little bit so that
Okay.
like they will be more like familiar with you, and
Okay.
because like these guys may want to know like where this like a LabVIEW
how
champion has
how I
born out of and
started
everything.
from. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my first introduction to LabVIEW was very brief.
Uh-huh.
I'm a mechanical engineer, and
Uh-huh.
so one of the labs that you have as a mechanical engineer is called the Measurement Instrumentation Lab.
Uh-huh.
And actually, most of the programs were already set up for us, but they were in LabVIEW. But that was the first kind of glimpse I had. Most people think, okay, mechanical engineers, you're not really doing computer programming and such. And that's kind of true. What they taught us in school was Fortran. So that's my
Uh-huh.
first, well, not my first programming language, but that was my main programming language starting off. And I actually started off, I worked while in school on the satellite program. We actually had a satellite program at my university, Utah State University. And I sat across from the guy that did all of the computer programming for the satellite. And he kind of gave me a lot of grief, thinking, no, you're a mechanical engineer, you don't do programming. So he challenged me to write a program in MATLAB.
Uh-huh.
Actually, he challenged me to a Sudoku solver. And so I did it. I programmed a Sudoku solver
Wow.
in MATLAB and was able to do that. Well, come to find out, who knew that all of that practicing with different programming languages would lead to my first job out of school.
Uh-huh.
And so my first job out of school, I graduated in 2007. And my first job out of school was with ATK Launch Systems. Now,
Wow.
ATK Launch Systems doesn't exist anymore. They just got bought out by Northrop Grumman. But this is in northern Utah. Now, if you don't know, ATK Launch Systems was where they built the space shuttle launch boosters,
Wow.
the solid rocket boosters.
Wow.
And so I got hired on to the mechanical test lab. And part of the reason why is some of the programming experience I already had. And the mechanical test lab, their job was to characterize the mechanical characteristics of both live materials, like the actual rocket propellant, and the inert materials, so like the rubbers, the insulation, the casings, and stuff. So I actually sat in a building that had live rocket propellant in it. Now, if you don't know, the solid rocket propellant is kind of the consistency of like an eraser head. It's kind of rubbery. And so they needed to know the mechanical characteristics of it, just like they needed to know, the actual chemical characteristics of it. So they would actually cut dog bone samples, put it into an Instron tensile tester, and pull on them.
Wow.
And all of that software to do all of the data acquisition was written in LabVIEW. And so they sent me to all of the LabVIEW courses. So starting off with Basic 1 and Basic 2. And then I convinced my boss, hey, National Instruments has this really cool thing called a training membership. At least they did at the time. For a year, you paid for a certain amount, and for a calendar year, you could take as many LabVIEW trainings as you want.
Wow.
And so I went and I took the intermediate 1 and 2. I took the FPGA. I took the real-time class. Everything they had then. Now this was back in LabVIEW 8, LabVIEW 8.2 time frame. So I don't think they had, even though object-oriented came out right then, I don't think they had the class for that quite yet. But I took everything that I could. And my boss was a LabVIEW programmer too, but he just was kind of trained himself. And so I remember going once with him to developer days, and we were there at the developer days, and I guess in Utah they were having a hard time getting people to certify, and so they actually offered us the CLAD for free at the end of developer days.
Oh,
so both my boss and I took it. And I passed and he didn't. But at that time, though, to his benefit, at the time I had taken over all of the development, so he hadn't been doing it recently. But that's where I got my CLAD. And then about 4 months later, I took the CLD exam. So, so that was my start. Then about 2010, so a couple years down the road, ATK was starting to have some troubles and was starting to, have layoffs. And actually at one of these developer days, I actually ran into an old high school friend and was connected with him on LinkedIn. And because of that, I was able to contact him and say, hey, do you know of anything that I can do in LabVIEW? And he said, hey, you need to get in contact with this contractor. And that one thing led to another. I ended up getting hired on with this contractor at Hill Air Force Base, which is in northern Utah. And here's something as a benefit to those that are starting off. The reason why I got that job with the contractor is I had my certified LabVIEW developer logo right on the top of my resume.
Wow.
And he said when he got that, he was hiring LabVIEW developers. And when he saw that I already was certified, he yeah, okay, we want him. So, that was a benefit, just, as far as getting certified goes. And so as a contractor at Hill Air Force Base, we worked on what's called the Expeditionary Fighting Vehicle. This was a amphibious tank for the Marine Corps. And what was cool is our LabVIEW stuff was the testing environment in the lab for those people that were writing the software for the actual operating system of the tank. So we had a test stand there that had all the computers. It was hardware in the loop architecture, used PXIs and all of that to help the developers test their equipment and to simulate the actual tank stuff going in. So that's when so at ATK, back up a little bit, I was kind of a single developer, except my boss was kind of mentoring me too. But I was more or less just a single developer there in the test lab. Later on, after I got hired onto this team, I was now part of a bigger team developing this test software for the EFE. And so that's when I started to gain a lot more skills, because I think when you're a single developer, you kind of get in a silo and you kind of do everything just one way, and then when you get part of a bigger team, then you can start to learn from each other and bounce ideas off of each other, and it was a great benefit. That's where I met the folks from More Good Ideas, if you've heard of them, MGI. They're out of northern Utah too. In fact, they still make up about half of my team. Half of my team, well, we'll get to that in just a minute. But we'll continue down the story here. So after about 6 months working for this team of programmers working on EFE, the EFE project got canceled. And so I went and found another job at a company called AAI. And they hired me on because I was a LabVIEW developer too. That was the reason they hired me. And they did hydraulic test stands and equipment testing actuators and stuff in aircraft. And I guess I don't know exactly what was happening there, but the work that they planned for me to do fell through. And so at about 6 months of being there, I ended up going back to the contractor because they thought the EFE project was going to get revived. I went back to the contractor working for EFE. A couple months later, turns out that was wrong. It wasn't coming back. And so I kind of helped them close out that project. But in the meantime, I worked towards transitioning over to actually being a full-time civil servant of the United States Air Force. So now I kind of wear two hats. I'm a full-time employee of the Air Force as a civil servant, but then I also do my own stuff on the side as Q Software Innovations. So anyway, so I kind of get this benefit because as part of Q Software Innovations, I'm an alliance partner, and I get to do some things on the side and create these toolkits on the side that are mine. And then as part of this team at Hill Air Force Base, I get to be part of a larger group and learn from each other. And then our team at Hill Air Force Base, after the EFE did go away, we started working on a new project. We started writing maintenance software for a test equipment for the A-10 aircraft. And the old stuff was all written in Visual Basic 6. And obviously, they're like, okay, well, we can't keep having it in Visual Basic 6 because it doesn't run on modern Windows. We need to rehost this into something else. And we got the project and said, we'll rehost it into LabVIEW, because that's what we were, was expert LabVIEW programmers. So we came up with the architecture for this maintenance software. And one thing that was kind of cool, I think was maybe unique at the time, maybe it's not so unique now, is we had 6 certified LabVIEW architects in the room when we were coming up with this architecture. Actually, that's right about the time when I became a CLA too. The story there is kind of funny. So so we're a team of, approximately 10, 12, it kind of fluctuates, LabVIEW programmers in a greater organization of about 2,000 software engineers at Hill Air Force Base. But, they do all sorts of programming languages, whatever type of programming language is needed in this organization. And so we're kind of looked down on a little bit, which is unfortunate because we're LabVIEW programmers and everyone else does text-based programmers. So we went, at the time, we were like, okay, National Instruments, we need your help. We need something to set us apart that we can go to our management and say, hey, look at this cool recognition we were able to receive, to kind of say, okay, LabVIEW's cool too, you know. And so we went to National Instruments and they said, well, we're starting up this pilot program. The pilot program is called the LabVIEW Center of Excellence. And maybe you can qualify for that, but you need to have someone that's a certified architect on your team. And well, I was already a CLD, so I was nominated. Guess what? You're going to go take the CLA exam. And so I did, and passed it, luckily. And yeah, and then there was some other things we had to do, you know, some audit things that we had to do. This was with Nancy Henson. She was running, kind of spearheading this along with Steve Summers at the time. And so we got it. So this was in 2013. This is when it was still a pilot kind of program. I don't know if we were the first, but we were probably within the first 5, maybe, centers of excellence.
Yeah, that's true.
So we continued on, you know, writing this maintenance software for the A10. It started to get unwieldy. It started to get, so it took a long time to build. I mean, this is something that has 30 or 40 modules to it. You know, it's a big test suite. And so we decided we needed to break things up and build the modules in packed project libraries, or PPLs, to kind of, you know, have incremental builds where we can build just this part and then it will plug into the greater project. Well, this kind of spearheaded a lot of different technologies, actually, because we had to deal with all of these PPLs and we needed a better way to organize it. That's when Derek Trepanier from More Good Ideas, I think you heard his name already a couple of times from some of the champions. That's when he came up with the idea of the project, what is it called? The Solution Explorer. That's when he came up with his Solution Explorer tool. And we use it to help us know the order of how we need to build these PPLs, because you know, some of them are lower level and some of the other ones are based off of that, and so on. So we got this project going using the PPLs and the Solution Explorer. Now we started running into other problems. So one of the things with this project is it was meant to work on a touch screen, and not just a touch screen like you're used to, the capacitive touch screen like a tablet. It's a resistive touch screen so that you can use it with gloves on, you know. And so the buttons have to be big and everything, and has to have really wide scroll bars, and has to, you know. And so some of the user interface elements that we created with X controls so that they could be big and stuff. Well, once we started moving, now we had problems with the X controls all along the way, but we were able to find workarounds and get them to work. But once we went to the PPLs, then everything exploded. Not literally, but you know, the X controls just didn't work well with the PPL architecture. They just wouldn't run. Things were always wonky. Things would crash, and we decided, you know what, we just need to get rid of the X controls. And this is when I started formulating the idea of, well, how do you encapsulate the user interface code in such a way that you can...
So that is the birth of like a Q controls.
That's the birth of the Q controls, yeah. Awesome. So I started getting that idea there, and then I went home and I worked on it, so I could call it my product, you know, and yeah, created the Q controls. And so that's where they came about. So yeah, and then I'm actually a recent addition to the LabVIEW champions. I got made a LabVIEW champion last year.
Congratulations, like a Q as well, like joining into this group.
Yeah, thank you. So it was at the same time that Sam Taggart, you've already interviewed him from Denver. We were the class of 2018. So yeah, and then like you said, I did a lot of presentations at the CLA Summit last year, and that was kind of funny. I think Fabiola called it the QCLA after that, because I had like 7 different presentations or something like that. yeah, one of the other things that I did though is we led a discussion on how to build the LabVIEW community and how to share
Yeah.
stuff better, and I really liked that I was able to stand up there and do that and lead that conversation. And one of the
Yeah.
things that led me to do
Uh-huh.
after I left the CLA summit, I'm like, you know what? I know that back in 2007 when I first started, there was this thing called a LabVIEW Wiki,
Uh-huh.
and it was run by the same guys that run Lava,
Yeah.
but the wiki had gone away. It wasn't online anymore, and so I'm like, well, we need to have that fills a really good niche. I mean, the
Yeah.
forums are great when you want to just go and ask
Yeah.
questions and say,
Yeah.
okay, I have this question, please help me out. But if you just want to go and like read an article and learn about stuff,
Yeah.
then I wanted a place to do that. We also had another problem is there was all these blogs out there. There's probably
Mhm.
30 different blogs out there that have really
Yeah.
great material, but it's hard to go find stuff, and
Yeah.
know where the blogs are. And then we also talked about needing like a landing page where we can send someone and have a getting started and have all of these resources. So all of
Yeah.
this culminated into, well, if we had a wiki, you
Yeah.
could have an article there that gives a brief explanation about something like
Yeah.
X controls or
Yeah.
whatever.
Correct.
And then afterwards, you could have a lot of articles that people posted on the blogs linked into it
Yeah.
to show them, uh, yeah, to give more detailed information. And
Yeah.
so I started a new wiki. Um,
Oh wow.
it was just hosted on the fandom website, where they have all of like the Star Trek wiki or the Lord of the Rings wiki. And I didn't
Yeah.
really like that it lived there because it had a lot of ads and stuff, but I was like,
Yeah.
well, it's free, and I don't have a server to host one on. And that's
Yeah.
when Michael Aviolas came to
Yeah.
me and said, hey, I still have the old LabVIEW wiki on my server,
Ah.
because it was him that ran it. Like, can we merge the two and revive the LabVIEW wiki, and we'll make you one of the admins of it? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, awesome, let's do that. So the LabVIEW wiki, it's actually labviewwiki.org,
Uh-huh.
is a revived version of the old one that we've been
Wow.
working really hard on updating the
Uh-huh.
content and adding more content to help the community um, uh, have a place to go to learn more about LabVIEW.
Yeah,
So
yeah, really awesome. Like I'll just like add the link for the like a LabVIEW wiki like in the description so that
that
like
would be
all the
awesome.
viewers,
Yeah.
everybody can go over there because like most of the time people are not even aware like they can get into touch with the community. There are like
Hmm.
lots of resources and everything. Just like you were saying, like it's all over the place, and then
Hmm.
people do not find it very well.
Yeah.
Q like it is like a really awesome like journey and everything. And
Thank
I
you.
think like you are like one of the few fortunate like LabVIEW champions like I've interviewed, who were like I interviewed like Steve Watts from like UK. Like his
Hmm.
interviews is still to go live in the YouTube channel, but since like
Uh-huh.
this video will be live afterwards. So basically,
Okay.
what it said was like for many years, like he was learning the LabVIEW on a DIY, do-it-yourself way, and like
Hmm.
he was like a kind of like living in a bubble because like although like he was doing a really great job, but like at the same time he was not aware what the community was doing, what was the best practices and everything. And I think like it was even before like we I know like today we got YouTube, we got like Facebook and
Hmm.
all LinkedIn and everything. I think like at that time
Hmm.
it didn't existed.
Hmm.
You took all the formal trainings from NI, like you said, and everything.
Hmm.
And I think it was quite relevant from your story that you and your employer, both of you, actually took the like a CLAD examination at the same time. I'm not
Yeah.
actually like using the CLAD exam as the the like touchstone to the, verify the quality of the programming and everything. But
Hmm.
in your experience, what do you think? Like, what is the difference between the DIY approach, which I believe tend to take longer, and you are not even sure that like what you're doing is right or wrong,
Hmm.
and the formal approach? And what do you think? Like, the comparison of what you have experienced.
Well, I did like the classes and stuff that I took, but I think that and yeah, like you said, when I was just a single programmer, or I just had my boss to talk to, we were kind of programming in a silo. Yeah, I had some online resources like Lava and the forums and the Wiki at the time that was still existing, and so I was able to learn some stuff that way. But I think until you can bounce ideas off of other people, I mean, I did a little bit during like dev days and those kind of things. I think they also had at the time, there was a tech symposium day or something too back then. But I think the real learning for me came when I became part of the larger team. And it wasn't that any one of us had a corner on the market. None of us were like super experts, and some of us weren't. We all had our niche where we were good, and we could go bounce ideas off of each other. And I think one reason why like the Q Control Toolkit is as good as it is, not that I'm trying to brag or anything, but the reason why I think it is built the way that it is because I was able to go bounce ideas off of my teammates, like Derek and Brandon Steele and Mark Smith and Brooks Waite and several others that I was able to ask for input and make it a lot better product because of that. And then, I think some other people you've interviewed talked about, people have different coding styles and stuff, and they tried to standardize their coding style. And we have too, to a certain extent. Like we use VI Analyzer to help bring our coding style. We use, standard architectures like Actor Framework. But then there's some room there for us to have different ways of doing things and teach each other how to do them. With Q controls, I think my niche on the team is kind of the UI guy. So, so I end up being the one that says, they come to and say, well, I want to have like a sliding menu or something. How do I do it? And then I talk through it. But then we have other guys on the team that are more geared toward the hardware. And I go to them and say, okay, I want to integrate with this piece of equipment. What's the best way to go about this? Or another guy might be really good at the low-level algorithm stuff, and we'll talk to him and say, okay, how do I implement this algorithm? And so I think it's made our team a lot better by having that skill set, that broad skill set. So.
Wow, that is like a really interesting. Rather than like everybody, I think maybe like your context of like working in a team was like a little bit different from like many people. I think in some of the contexts, the previous LabVIEW champions and previous interviews, they were discussing about maybe like a group of LabVIEW developers working on similar kind of project or like a same kind of project. But in a context like everybody has got like their own specific different roles, and then like you keep it together and everything. Anyway, like Q, like you have already discussed about the value of the community as well. You have already presented in the European CLA summit as well, as like a Fab has told, like a Q CLA and everything. So that is a really interesting thing. So Q, like tell us a little bit more about like you wanted to discuss about Q tips and everything. So how is it like so much different, like even comparatively? I think some other people, like the viewers of this interview, can be a little bit of beginners as well. They may not know like a little bit like a higher level context, like for example, like X controls we have discussed already. And in previous interviews, some of the LabVIEW champions were discussing about like solid principles, even like s'mores and all this kind of thing. Although these are like very standard in when you are using LabVIEW technology and everything, but at the same time, please like a little bit try to illuminate our like audience about like
some
what
more simple onboarding type stuff if you're starting with LabVIEW, right?
Yeah. So you can discuss a little bit about like the little bit introduction, maybe like a one-line sentence for the X control. What is it about, and maybe the limitations of it, because like maybe like when you're explaining, it's a good thing, but maybe people are not aware what the X control is. So
what it is, okay. Okay, so the definition, an X control basically is a way to group your UI logic and your user, your controls into something, a package that you can reuse. And it basically separates what the programming and the code used to control the look of those controls and how the user interacts with them away from maybe the business logic of your application. And so an X control, you can almost picture it as a sub panel within your VI that has controls in it, and all of the programming for that doesn't exist in that VI, it exists in its own space.
Yeah.
And I guess the pros of that is it makes it so that it's easy to reuse, and Q controls have this benefit too. The problems with it kind of stem from how it loads and how it runs, because it's almost like, even though it's in a subpanel and you might be editing your VI, the X control runs all the time almost. So it makes it so that if you want edit time behavior, you have to program that in. If you want runtime behavior, you have to obviously program that in too. And there's flags within an X control to tell it, is the VI that X control is sitting in, is it in edit time or is it in runtime? So that's kind of the basics. I mean, if you want to know more, there's a good article that actually I think Brian Hoover wrote it on the wiki for X controls. He's a big fan of X controls, and well, I want to say he's a big fan, but maybe he's starting to like the Q controls too, which is awesome. So the Q control kind of does the same thing, but it's more of an object-oriented approach. But you don't have to be super skilled in object-oriented programming in order to use them, because if you want to create a new one, you go up to New, and it pops up a wizard, and it talks you through how to do it. One of the benefits you get from Q controls is you inherit all of the properties and methods that a traditional control would have. And that sort of thing. So is that a good enough introduction? I don't know.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, but like
okay.
we wanted to like a little bit know more about the Q controls. Like maybe you have brief description, when to use it, where to use it. For example,
Okay.
some of the limitations of like X control is like you cannot integrate clearly with like object-oriented programming. You cannot put it inside the class object and everything.
Yeah. Well, you can use an X control inside of a method that's inside of a class. But I've noticed some problems with that. And so, like I said, some of the problems with X controls is, when does it start? Because like I said, if you drop it into your VI, even though you're in edit time, it's running basically. So if you have a standard VI and you drop an X control in, it starts running. If you delete it out, then it stops running. That makes sense. If you open a VI that has an X control in it, then the X control starts running. If you close the VI that it's in, then the X control stops running. Okay, well, that makes sense too. What gets kind of crazy is when that VI now is in a library or in a class, or and if you're doing active framework, then it's going to be in a class. That VI then, it goes into memory and that X control is running when the library then is started. And that starts on the start of your application or on the start of your project. So now it's not starting when you think it should start. And then it doesn't stop running until the library leaves memory, which is either when the project closes or when your application closes. So it doesn't stop the way that you think it ought to stop. And that's part of the root cause of the problems that we're having. Now, Q controls, on the other hand, it's not running in edit time, because it's basically just straight object-oriented type stuff. And so basically, the way that you operate with a Q control is you have a constructor VI that you give it the reference to the control. And then after that, you pass that Q control class wire around, just like you would pass the reference wire around. And then you can operate on it with properties and methods that you create as part of your class. Then, as part of the Q control toolkit, one of the things that you get with a Q control when you create it from the wizard is a event handler. And that event handler, you can go in and you put in all of your UI logic code, all of the stuff that changes colors, makes it blink, whatever you're going to make it do. Like one of the ones I just published, kind of as a teaser for my NI week presentation, is that pie chart queue control that you click on it and it pops out the wedge of the pie chart. That was all of the logic for controlling that is in that event handler. Now that event handler VI gets started asynchronously, separate from your program, and runs and controls all that UI logic. So,
wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Q, like we know that, like with context to the same like conversation we just had. So you have been using LabVIEW for a long time, and then you are very engaged in the community as well, and you are the part of your like Air Force, base as well, where like you are handling the UI part, and then where the Q controls also came in, and then where you found out the limitations of the X controls as well. So maybe like many people may not have pushed the X control that far. That's a different context. But like, what do you think? Like in the last 37 years or so, LabVIEW has evolved a lot, and then now we have found, like the community has found some of the like limitations in that one, maybe the change of the technologies and everything, and now we have the LabVIEW and NI as well. So what do you think? Like, what are the limitations you have found in the user interface of the like existing LabVIEW? Anyway, like we have already covered that part, but what do you think, like from your experience and your like research and everything, you have explored a lot. So what do you think, what are the things that are still missing in the current gen as well as the next gen, or like how the NI can approach? I know like they might be looking feedback from you as well, but what do you think, like what is missing over there, and how they can like satisfy the requirements of the user in terms of the user interface?
Well, as far as user interface stuff goes, I've been able to just about do everything I want to do, even in current gen. I did put an idea exchange out there a couple of years ago where I would want to be able to make part of it part of the user interface transparent. There actually is a way to do that with Windows and plugging into different Windows DLLs and stuff. So that kind of is doable already. Maybe not the blending of the alpha channel, meaning like if you want to have a thing that has a shadow, a window that has a shadow, the shadow doesn't blend and stuff. So that's maybe a limitation. As far as other things, I know that the UI stuff is going to be a lot more advanced in NXG. I'm not sure what, I don't know. I'm not sure what the big advancements are there at the moment. I haven't played around with it that much. I've done in limited sessions and stuff to learn how to do the object oriented there, and have given some feedback there, but I haven't done a lot of the stuff with the UI on that. That part
but
yet, so.
but Q, like anything you might be expecting, like if this would have been there, like would have been like a super fancy, or like would have been incredible for like all the users. Anything you are expecting or something?
Expecting in next gen? Well, they're definitely going to have some sort of way to extend controls like X controls. I don't anticipate they're going to put X controls in it just because they know that it's buggy, but they're going to have something that allows us to extend X controls. What I would like to see is, so some of the other guys have talked about the VI server and how you have the classes within the VI server. They're not LabVIEW classes. They're arranged in a class hierarchy to manipulate, all the different controls like the string controls and buttons and knobs and all of that stuff. What I would like to see, and it might be a pie in the sky request, but what I would like to see is those be classes that we can inherit from. so that we can go and say, yeah, I have a string. I mean, there is a string control, but I want to create a string control that can do like syntax highlighting. So if I'm typing in HTML into this string control, it will know that it's HTML and it will highlight the syntax accordingly. I want to program something to do that. Well, I would like to inherit from string and then extend it to do the syntax highlighting stuff. It's kind of like what Q controls do, but the way that Q controls work is I recreated the entire VI server hierarchy in classes and wrap
Awesome.
all of the references from the VI server as data within the class. So you pass the reference to that constructor that I talked about earlier, and then that gives you all of the stuff and basically lets you almost inherit from the string control like I'm wanting. Not quite all the way there, but kind of close. But that's what I would like to see is, can you, NI, can you give us the VI server in LabVIEW classes so that we can just inherit from it and then
makes sense.
expand it?
Completely makes sense. Yeah, that's really interesting. So Q, like, I know, like, you have already discussed that you are, wearing two different hats. Like, you are doing the Q consulting as well, and another one, like, you are working in a pretty much larger team as well. So, what do you think? Like, what can be the different challenges, like working solo and working in a team? And what do you think are the must-have skills, like, to manage the change?
Well, I kind of like it because it's kind of the best of both worlds for me, because I don't have to worry about getting work on the side. If you're a single consultant like some of the other guys are, you have to constantly be out there looking for work and doing business development and doing marketing and stuff like that. Well, I have a full-time job with the Air Force, so I do my consulting just as a hobby, more or less. Now, I have done work for other companies through my consulting, but mostly I like using it to create these add-on tools and to improve the
That's really
community and that
interesting.
sort of thing. I do have the benefit too. I have a friend that used to work on my team at the Air Force. His name's Brooks Waite. He does his own consulting and is constantly out there looking for work to do, and he and I have an arrangement. When he's really busy, I'm his overflow, and he kind of passes some work on to me. So that's
Really
kind of nice. So so we have a good working relationship still, even though he's left my team from the Air Force and gone and done his own thing. So, as far as different skill sets to have, like I said, if you're working on your own doing consulting, you have to be able to be the business development. You have to be able to go approach people and stuff, which I have to admit is not necessarily my specialty. But then working as a team, you have to be able to manage larger projects. Usually they're larger projects because you have to be able to modularize, so that you're not stomping on each other as you're programming different components. You have to be a lot better at maybe programming APIs or interfaces, because you might be programming a certain aspect of the larger application that's going to be used in lots of places, and you want to make sure that it has a good interface. So those are some things that you have to keep in mind as you're programming for a larger team. Now, going back to being a single programmer, maybe working on these toolkits, though, one of the things that you have to keep in mind when working on a toolkit is the same thing, where you want to create a nice, clean interface for someone to be able to use it and plug into their application and make it as simple as possible. Just like the Einstein quote, keep it as simple as possible, no simpler. So there's some trade-offs there.
Really awesome, Q. Like, we learned a lot from you and everything. So, like, we're like slowly coming towards the end of the interview and everything.
Okay.
So Q, like, you must be like traveling to like the NI week at this time, the greatest festival of the year for like NI users and LabVIEW community and everything. So
I'm
please
excited.
please tell us like our like audience, like what presentations you are presenting on, like what they can expect from your presentation, as well as where they can meet you at the
Okay.
Austin. Yeah.
Well, I actually only have one presentation this year. I'm going to be presenting with, let's see, I'm going to look it up. I have it right over here.
Yeah.
Chris Bushell, I hope I say his name right, and Becky Linton. So one of the things, Becky's one of the organizers of the CPAD track, and you've
Oh,
heard of
wow.
the CPAD
Yeah.
track
Yeah.
before. She has organized this kind of mini track called the Project Mini Track. And
Yeah.
what they plan to do with the Project Mini Track is to follow a project, a theoretical project from start to finish, from requirements all the way to
Oh, yeah.
test and verification.
Wow.
And so I'm right at the start. She's
Uh-huh.
going to introduce it, and Chris is going to introduce it, and then I'm next, right after them. We're sharing the same hour, and so I only.
I think you need to keep like as subtle as possible. So that let's not go
What's
into
that?
too much of detail. Let's keep it like a little bit. What is it called? You need
Oh,
to build up
okay.
the anticipation and everything. Yeah, that is fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, leading up to
Yeah.
that, I
Yeah.
am basically part of the requirements part. The name of the presentation is "These
Uh-huh.
Innovative Tricks for Project Requirements Will Change Your Life."
Oh, wow.
And basically, what it's about is how to use bookmarks to
Uh-huh.
help you track your requirements.
Wow,
So
that's really really awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So
and
yeah.
and it's going to be the first day, Monday the 20th at 2 p.m. right after the Alliance Day stuff gets done. So
Wow,
first
really awesome.
presentation.
Yeah, yeah, really awesome. Like, best of luck for your like a presentation. I know, like, you don't need wishes. You have already done like a lot of presentations and everything. So, Quinton, like, can you give like since you have been working with the user interface a lot, and then I think you are one of the most experienced person I have discussed, had interviewed regarding the user interface. So, what sort of rules or like guidelines or best practices you want to give to the people like who built like sort of like a wacky kind of like user interface, because in some of the BIs they will put like a stop button on the top, and in some BIs they put on the another corner, and some people like have got like so many controls all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
and some people has like a tabs, you go through like all the tabs all the time,
Uh-huh.
and they have got like a green blue color, like they have made a garden out of their user interface. So what
Yep.
tips would you like to give to them, like a q tips? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so maybe some general rules for user interface. One
Yeah.
is I would probably say is don't reinvent the wheel. What I mean
Uh-huh.
by that is go look at other Windows type applications or other people's applications and see what looks good.
Uh-huh.
See what people do in web design and see what looks good that way. I think that if you use and what one thing I mean by that is, instead of the stop button, program the X, the X in the window to do the
Uh-huh.
same thing, because
Yeah.
people don't normally look for the stop button; they look for the X to close the window.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Kind of use the best practices there. Another thing is if you start with tons and tons of controls or a tab control with lots of controls in it, your block diagram is just going to explode. It's going to
Oh, yeah.
be really hard to program. One of the toolkits that I use that I really like is another one of Derek's toolkits that kind of evolved out of our A10 project, was the panel manager. Panel Manager basically gave a way to divide your code up into modules and to be able to place a sub VI into a sub panel really easy. And so if you can modularize your code, like if you're already doing tab controls, then you probably could put each of those tabs into a sub panel and have it be a lot easier to program, because now instead of having all of those hundreds of controls on your block diagram, you've now separate them out into each their own sub VI. And so that would help. I did do a presentation a while ago about
Uh-huh.
specifics on like how to organize it, to chunk different pieces up, to keep it organized that
Uh-huh.
way, and that sort of thing. But I think the last takeaway is just keep your user in mind, like who's going to be using it. For example, the one project that was a touch screen, but was not just your usual iPad. It was this resistive touchscreen that they had to wear thick, maybe be out working in the cold and had to use big gloves. We had to make sure that the buttons
maybe
and
in the
stuff were
space as
big.
well. Maybe in the space you were talking about the Star Wars and everything. The Darth Vader is going to like press that one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, kind of.
Keep your user in mind when you're doing it. What are going to be their needs, and then just try to organize things logically so that as the program flows and the operation of the program flows, it kind of steps them through what they need to do and try to make it intuitive that way. So, yeah, I guess those are the general guidelines.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, really awesome. Like Q tips from the Q himself. So Q, like
Thank you.
we're like coming towards the end anyway. Like we want to know like one of your like most exciting the moment or like a part of your entire LabVIEW journey in the LabVIEW community. Can you like share that with our audience?
I don't know what aspect to share. I'll share this. So my first NI week was in 2012, and I went with a guy named Brandon Steele. Well, he was going too. He was from MGI, and he's a former NI employee, so he knew everybody and stuff. And I thought that was really cool, because I was new to the community. I didn't know everybody. So I think that come last year when I went to NI Week, it was really cool because I had been plugged into the community now. I knew people's avatars on Lava and on the forums, and I knew who they were in real life, and I've been able to develop a lot of friends there. So I think one thing that was really exciting was to go to NI Week and basically see all these now old friends, that I've gotten to know through my growing up in LabVIEW. So growing up in the LabVIEW community.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's really interesting, Q. So like Q, we'll wrap up now like in a moment. So like to end this interview, like can you like give some kind of like a message to maybe like your colleagues at your like Air Force base as well, or like your customers, even the NI community, NI week attendees would be like meeting you in person over there, taking your presentation, or the other LabVIEW champions as well, who might be expecting, okay, Q is here, like he has like done like an awesome interview. So or like people from like entire LabVIEW community. So like what message you want to give?
Just keep learning. Always keep learning. You're never going to know it all. There's always going to be someone that knows some aspect of it that you don't know, and and then the other thing is if they're willing to teach you, be willing to teach them and share what you know too. So.
Wow, that is like pretty much like a short and like a very sweet like message from like a Q himself. So Q, like I wanted to like continue this conversation continuously, but like hopefully like we'll have like another opportunity to like get together and then like do another similar
That
kind
would
of
be awesome.
interviews
Yeah.
in the future. So we'll be learning a lot, and then I hope like you are pushing the barriers of the user interface genre of like the LabVIEW community and everything. We'll be seeing for like your like latest version and everything. So
Awesome.
I'll be sharing like the links. Please share like important links to us, so that like I'll be sharing in the description below, so that the audience
Definitely.
can learn a lot about the Q controls and then like a Q himself and what he's doing for the community and everything. So thank you very much, everyone,
Thank
for
you,
tuning
Ram.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you,
And thank you for
Q, for
having me.
yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. So thank you for the entire audience as well, and then the LabVIEW, the users who have been watching all these interviews and supporting us. So yeah, we'll be seeing you next time with another LabVIEW champion, LabVIEW personality, and LabVIEW expert sharing their journey in LabVIEW and their contribution to the community. So please do not miss our next interview sessions as well, and do not miss to attend the uh, presentation from Q at the NI week. Okay, thank you very much, and see you later. Okay, Q, like we have